I'm Kate,
I'm Elle.
and we are Down to Fae.
Today we're discussing Crown of Midnight chapters 25 through 32.
Shit is really about to take a turn, but before we get into a very interesting conversation between a queen and a princess, let's talk about this week's book rec, which you have.
I do. So this week I am recommending a series called Curse of the Cyren Queen by Helen Scheuerer.
Oh, we love her.
Yes, and this series is so fun. And I just want to start by saying I love that it's about sirens and you actually learn about sirens.
Unlike the Bargainer series.
Yeah, well, there have been other series where they like reference that there are sirens. And you're like, oh, she's a siren. Oh, okay. You know, like, oh, she has scales. But like, this is actually like the lore and like deep under the water, like about the sirens.
Okay.
It's set in a world where humans know about sirens and water wizards. And now, if there's other types of magic out there, I don't quite know. This is just like the focus of these. Sirens and water wizards used to work as a team long ago, building civilizations under the sea. There was a big war where the Cyren king at the time, he was the ruler before their current queen. He's a fanatic, and he began to believe that water wizards were gaining too much power and that their power was unnatural to the gods, so he hunted them to extinction. The war also forced the Cyren territories to split into more distant clans.
Interesting.
Yeah. The sirens once had wings and lived above and below the sea, but now only the Cyren Queen has wings, and the sirens only live and roam in their underwater territories. And I don't mean deep in the sea. I mean in caves under the sea where the water has been enchanted to stay out of the way.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, like, they have access to the water, but they are not actually just like mermaids under the water, breathing water all the time.
So it's like SpongeBob, Sandy's little...
That's the reference. So the way that they built all this was from the water warlocks, though, not the sirens. So the sirens have their own type of magic, but the magic that keeps all of this running and keeps fresh air in the territories and helps with their healing is all from the water wizards. And then, of course, they're gone now because that basically the Mad King hunted them to extinction. Our main character from Boston all of a sudden, our main character, Rohesia, or Ro as she called for short, she works in one of the deepest sectors as a bone cleaner, which is disgusting. The bones are used like wood to make up the structure of most of things in the realm. So it's like their weapons, their utensils. It's, you know, I guess being underwater and there's salt in the air, wood would easily like corrode, and you could use stone, but the bones are like everything that they have. So Ro is lowborn, and it's actually kind of sad. It's even worse than that. She was born in a prison cell. And
like Lake Meester.
Yes. And she has to wear a circlet that represents just how low she is because she's the child of a prisoner. So she is looked down upon dramatically. Her mother is a siren that was in prison for centuries because she was mad and a killer.
Was she actually?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, you'll see her go visit her mom, and like the entire wall of her cell is covered in etchings. So you're like, what in the world is going on?
Okay.
But she's been in prison for centuries, which is wild. How did she get pregnant? Valid question.
Interesting.
Who is the dad? But our story actually begins when all of the sectors head to an assembly to hear about the Queen's Tournament. The Queen's Tournament actually occurs every 50 years, and it's where all sirens from all walks of life can compete to be the ruler.
We love a tournament or competition.
So
like any of those books.
And it is. We referenced it when we were talking about competitive books to read during the Olympics. Yeah. So it's really a competition to show their brutality and their cunning, and it's, of course, to break up the monotony of their lives. The current queen has remained ruler for over 600 years. So, you know, you can try to beat me. We do it every 50 years. Hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And of course, Ro is only 17 and really thirsty to prove herself.
I'm guessing Ro is not like other girls.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, they're all sirens. So it's like she's unique and special in some ways, like her cunning and
like
creativity.
Who her father is?
I don't know.
I don't
know. But when it comes down to it, all the sirens, for the most part, are pretty cunning and brutal. So it's different. It's a different perspective. It's not like she's the only one. So you're like, okay. It's also interesting because each subsector can only have one competitor. So she basically has to trick and beat her friends in order.
It's very Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Like
but she wants this. So she's not forced into it. So to even begin the competition to be the champion for their subsector, she's got to beat out and lie to her friends because it's about cunning. So it's like, it's hard to keep friends when you have to manipulate them. The tournament has a lot of twists and turns. It's very interesting. Once they get started, each Cyren is paired with a human that they have to keep alive.
Is he sexy?
I mean, maybe.
Okay.
So, and that's not even, never mind. I won't give you spoilers.
Okay.
The humans, for the most part, are only in their territory if they're slaves, and they're literally there to play music until they die.
Interesting.
Like, the humans and the Sirens,
I can't play any instruments.
Well, they'll go out on hunting parties to kidnap musicians and bring them back because Sirens love music.
Okay.
But so like they don't think highly of humans, and there were a lot of battles. Like whenever the water wizards and the Sirens were warring, humans were kind of trapped in the middle of all of it. So humans resent them, period.
Okay.
So there's a lot of interesting twists and competitions. And then they definitely leave the caves. They're out on big journeys at different points as well. You see all kinds of creatures that are interesting. But there's a lot of questions we should be asking. Why has this queen been queen for 600 years? You know, I have more questions about her power. I have questions about who Ro's father is. I have questions about what really happened with all these water wizards and how does this magic still work if they're not truly around? That sounds
really interesting because so many of the books we read, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like a million of the things I've read. And maybe that this is like all those books just underwater, but it's at least a little different.
Well, and I mean, yes, we want her to be different from other girls to make it interesting, but in some ways she's not. So like the cunning that she uses to be better or more brutal or to manipulate or find her way out of something, you're like, okay, like, you know, it's nice to have a story where it's not like, oh, she's the chosen one. She's been gifted with these things.
That hero's journey.
Yeah, it's like, it's so much more detail and interesting lore about the Sirens themselves. And of course, we do get into the world above and we find all kinds of things that they've believed in the deep for so long that may not be true.
And is it completed? The series, is it completed?
Yes.
And what's it called?
As I put it down, it's The Curse of the Cyren Queen.
Curse of the Cyren Queen by Helen. Okay. Yeah, that's going to the top of the
highly
TBR.
recommend. There is spice. It starts out a little bit more, maybe like new adult, because we get into a trial where she's having to like battle and like
not a ton of time for spice.
Yeah, so like things do happen down the line. It's not like the first book or two though, because it's like establishing this competition and like getting into it, but it's still a lot of fun to read. There's a lot going on. You're on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I know we've referenced, and I think I recommended another series of hers too that just came out with the final book.
Yes.
Now I can't remember what it was called. The cover is purple, but yeah, she's a great author.
Yeah.
I think she's Australian or from New Zealand or something, but yeah.
Yeah, it's very good writing. It really draws you in.
So back to Crown of Midnight, chapter 25 is a conversation between a technically unnamed queen and princess, but it is pretty obvious that it's Elena and Nehemia.
One of them has to break, Elena tells Nehemia. Or I mean, the queen tells the princess.
Excuse me, the queen.
Only then can it begin.
So it is no coincidence that Elena and Nehemia have appeared to be on the same page this whole time. Like they have been pushing Celaena in the same direction since the beginning. And this just confirms, you know, you had those thoughts of like, they really sound alike.
Yeah, well, there would be like, Elena would have said something the night before and then Nehemia would parrot it the next day. And you're like, okay. It's very clear, though, that they are planning something. And the prince, Dorian, isn't ready. So it has to be Celaena.
I don't know. Dorian does seem pretty close to having a fucking breakdown. Maybe he is ready to break, but leave it to like it has to be the girl to do it.
Yeah, we need him to take next steps, though, not just break. Bless him.
Right. Nehemia tells Elena she understands what has to be done, but tells the queen Celaena won't understand. And when she goes over the edge, there will be nothing to pull her back.
She will find her way back, Elena says. She always does. That is very cryptic
and
vague.
Can I just say something? This whole storyline pisses me off. It's so manipulative and shady, and I know that they have an agenda, and the agenda is like saving the world. It's very important stuff, but it's just so manipulative.
Oh, I mean, the way that they're planning to abuse and brutalize Celaena's feelings.
Right.
Like, it's everything about it is so brutal.
What's like she doesn't have her family, and so like she has Elena. She doesn't have any other friends. She has Nehemia. But these people are plotting not against her, but they're plotting.
And I mean,
without her.
This is the conversation we had last week, and we'll probably continue to have for a while, because yes, for the rest of the world, they need her. But at the same time, as like my closest friend, do you understand what this is doing to me personally? Is there any support for what I need as a person? Or am I just a pawn? Like, how you're going to use me to get what the end game is? And like, again, obviously these things are really important. People are dying, Kim. But like, you know, I'm still a person too, being pushed into all of this. And it just feels like there's no consideration for that, which is sad.
Do you care about me as a person at all, or just what I represent and what I can do?
I mean, it's a tough place to be in, but like, I'm still here. I'm still me. Like, no concern for my welfare, my well-being. Again, I understand why they need to push Celaena. I mean, she's gotten too comfortable and I guess complacent.
Especially with Chaol. She's been letting herself get distracted. For once, like, let her be distracted.
She's letting herself have her moment. But that doesn't mean that this is not a betrayal.
Yeah, it can be the right thing to do and a betrayal.
Yeah.
And Celaena's already gone through so much grief and betrayal. And it's like, knowing what this is going to do to her, like she's been betrayed by like the one friend she's ever had. She's lost everyone she's ever cared about.
Well, you know why she's in denial and all she's been through, and you know this is going to push her over the edge. But you know, like, they're taking the friendship out of it, like it has to be done. So it just, I hope that Nehemia has a lot of grief over what she's doing to her friend, because again, I know you're saving innocence, but also this is so brutal to continually push Celaena when she's trying to have a moment.
But then again, Nehemia is trying to save all of her people.
I know. It's just one person versus millions.
It's so complicated. And I think that's why Sarah is great, because she writes these characters that are not black and white. Like, I can see both sides.
Yeah. You want to get mad at both of them for different reasons, but like, there's not a great answer anywhere in the middle.
Right.
The next chapter opens with Chaol accompanying the king, Parrington, Roland, Dorian, and various lords on a hunting party.
And Chaol is stunting on his new Assyrian stallion.
Especially as he's having to make the kills for these silly men.
Well, and they're all on their horses, and he's just captain of the guard, and he's on that horse. You know, they're like,
That horse is nice. And, of course, Chaol's distracted, wondering if he'd have become like these lords if he hadn't abdicated, and what his parents would think of Celaena.
Are we introducing to this? Is kind of like Nehemia when she was like, what am I going to tell my parents about you? Are we at that point? But
what do you need to tell your parents about me?
So he is, again, Chaol is the captain of the guards, but he's always in his head thinking about stuff, and like, that doesn't go unnoticed. The king notices that Chaol is distracted. Like, your boss has noticed.
Yeah, it's not great. Chaol also notes that he's always surprised by the king's size.
That would be my 13th reason if someone was like, I'm always surprised by your size. Like, excuse me?
Thank you for mentioning it again. But also an interesting note about perception of the king and not everything being as it seems.
Yeah, I wonder if that was like a little, you can't get a read on the king, you know?
I mean, I think, without intentionally giving spoilers, you know how many times that was noted about Cain? Like, there's another character that they could be like, why does he look like a different, like something is different.
Like that he's on roids.
Yes, something is, you know, if the perception of the king is changing each time you see him, that's not great.
And we are trying to keep this series spoiler free, but we are going to talk about Akatar and Crescent City at times, but we'll try to give you guys warnings. I did also highlight the names of the guards. Speaking of Crescent City, the name of the guards with Chaol. We have Ress, who we know, but also Danon.
So first we have the Rune Mountains, and now we have Danon.
And like with Rune, it's spelled differently. Like it's Dannan instead of Danaan. But it's hard to believe in coincidences when it comes to the mass verse.
For anybody who hasn't read Crescent City but has probably seen or like heard
Rune Danon,
Crown Prince of the Valbarn Fae. That's who we're talking about today. I mean, you'd run up to him like, quick, what are three things you know?
What are 3 things that you know? And it's different things. The king tells Chaol he's having Nehemia questioned in his council room tomorrow night, and he needs 6 men outside of the room to make sure there are no complications, no Celaena-shaped complications.
That side eye, like, excuse me, he's talking about the woman you were just planning your entire future around and her BFF.
I know, you're like, everything's different. We're going to run away together. And the king's like, you can't tell her. Okay.
I mean, like, good Lord.
Because Chaol has grown and evolved from the first time that we've met him, but we're still at the beginning of his arc. Like, he's still holding on a lot to those, to a lot of those values.
Well, I was going to say, it's
beliefs,
the values and the loyalty that, like, there's things he doesn't quite want to see. And so he hasn't allowed himself to. And it's like you said, he has a lifetime of being fed propaganda.
And Dorian, like, slides up and is like, what was that about? Because he's not, like, Chaol is keeping things from everyone. It's not.
He's not opening up to anybody.
No.
And Chaol doesn't tell Dorian either.
Right. And Dorian hasn't seen Chaol the past few days.
Did you check the broom closets?
With frozen eyes, Dorian tells Chaol to treat Celaena well.
Okay. Well, to Chaol is not telling Celaena about what the king said. I mean, the king wouldn't hurt Nehemia, right?
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I'll treat her well. So that's like lying to her, right? That's what you mean? Because he really, like, it's just, you want to slap him for this level of, like, he's so naive. What do you mean the king wouldn't hurt Nehemia? How many people has he killed and enslaved?
Isn't he literally talking about taking half of her country to enslave? Like, hello?
Are you new here?
Completely delulu.
And very sheltered, at least compared. Like, Chaol has not seen, well, Chaol and Dorian have not seen the horrors and what the king is really capable of the way that Celaena and Nehemia have.
Which is wild because they at least have heard of a lot of them.
Right.
So, like,
well, they're kind of living in, like, their lifestyle, the castle and Rifthold and everything that they have is kind of because of what the king has done.
Yeah.
You know, like, they've been, in a way, indirectly benefited from it.
Well, and it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. It's not happening to them or directly around them. And so it's...
Yeah, if it's not in the glass castle, it's not on their radar, really, because Chaol's not even involved in the actual planning or execution of any of the king's plans.
If the king were to ever give Chaol the order to kill Celaena, he'd plunge his sword through his own heart.
It's so dramatic. His soul is bound to hers by an unbreakable chain,
that
which to me sounds like very mate-coded verbiage. Like, unbreakable chain, the missing other half of you. It's like a red herring.
It's wild how the moment they let themselves be physical, like, these are some really deep emotions. You're just like, whoa. Okay.
I know. He has
that line.
Had sex once and then a couple more times in a broom closet, and he's like, an unbreakable chain.
I mean, he literally, what line? He went sprinting across it.
He can't see the line because his dick is blocking it.
I mean, he's literally thinking to himself, my father is going to freak when he learns I've taken Aderlin's assassin for my wife.
My wife? Y'all have been fucking for like a week. She's 18. She's a hard 18, but still 18. Like, what are you talking about?
I mean, he's daydreaming about the brood of children.
That is a nightmare. The brood?
This assassin, does she seem like a mom to you right now? How is this even in your mind?
Well, and it's all that's in his mind. There's not a thought behind those eyes other than, let's get Celaena a white Suburban and have her drive my brood around.
I mean, I appreciate the thought, I guess, but it's just so out there and he's just daydreaming. So it's very easy for somebody to sneak up behind him and press something to his nose and mouth till he passes out.
And they clown on him about that later. They're like, wow, you were really easy to catch. And this is why you can't be distracted at work. Like, people keep sneaking up on Chaol, even Celaena, like... And the next morning, Celaena wakes up and she's like, thank God Chaol isn't here because I'm not in the mood to run.
Man, she's laying there daydreaming about them spending uninterrupted time together, and he's daydreaming about them reenacting John and Kate +8.
That is the difference between men and women. Like, she's like, wouldn't it be nice for us to spend time together alone? And he's like, anyway, so we're going to have 12 kids.
Good Lord.
His dream is my nightmare. Over breakfast, she receives a list of names from Archer, and it's written in code. I don't think I'd be able to read it. With more men to hunt down, which she can start right away because Nehemia didn't show up for their daily word mark lessons.
Well, they did have a spat. It slows down using word marks to figure out how to get in that secret door in the library.
Which we've kind of forgotten about it. it wasn't brought up for a couple of chapters. That door, that iron door that she found in that underground library.
She has
that
different
has
motives
no
for wanting to learn how to use word marks.
Right.
But she's not exactly thrilled with the idea of talking to Nehemia right now either.
So she spends the day stalking the men and returns that night to Chaol still missing.
She's trying not to worry. I mean, he's captain of the guard. He holds his own against her, but so had Sam, and he'd still been tortured and killed by Rourke Farren.
And in a panic, she goes to Chaol's room and she finds a sealed note addressed to her on top of his sword, which was not there this morning.
I have concerns about this castle's security.
I do too. Also, the note is in all caps, so I would be like, okay, a boomer has taken Chaol.
We have the captain. When you're tired of stalking us, come find us here, and it lists an address for a warehouse in the slums. Bring no one or the captain will die. If you fail to arrive by tomorrow morning, we'll leave what's left of him on the banks of the Avery.
It is kind of an ick that he got kidnapped in the first, kidnapped? But grow up.
But also, one, your secret love is not so secret if they knew to take him from you. And two, I like the fact that you think I need to bring help. You guys just threaten the wrong bitch.
Well, and what we find out later on about how they were getting information, it makes me even madder about that person because they were giving personal information and details of what was going on in the castle, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Celaena is worried and pissed, but also triggered because of what happened to Sam. She slips into what Arabin Hamel called the killing calm.
Cut to Chaol, chained up in a warehouse surrounded by 30 people wearing long robes and hoods, but not sexy like Eyes Wide Shut.
Well, some of them might be sexy.
Some of them might be sexy. Chaol realizes they're waiting for something. Maybe they're going to blackmail the king, except the king has one of those we don't negotiate with terrorist rules. So he's listening in on them talking, and he hears them say she, and that's when he puts it together.
There's one tall male that Chaol clocks as a warrior, but also educated with 2 swords crossed across his back.
And a huge chip on his shoulder, especially about royals.
The masked male taunts Chaol for being way too easy to capture, and he has a point.
He has a little bit of a point. When Chaol tells them they've really fucked up, they're like, it's only one girl.
Yeah, well, that one girl is on her way.
And she, like Rune, knows 3 things. Chaol has been taken. She's a weapon that was forged to end lives. And that if Chaol is hurt, no one is walking out of that warehouse alive.
Those are 3 very different things than what Rune knew.
It was different 3 things. The streets are heavily patrolled, but Celaena uses the roof to scope out what she's up against. I highlighted a couple of times in these chapters where Celaena's rage is described as icy or ice spreading through her veins. There are at least 3 times in this chapter. Interesting.
She could scale the building to the roof and come down from the 3rd floor, but no one is looking at this open window. So she takes a few steps back and jumps, just like she did that night with Sam.
I would not make it. I would
I'm not good with heights. I'd probably slip off the roof.
By the time that she lands, 2 daggers are already flying at the archers, then 2 more, then she's drawing swords, and Chaol witnesses a side of Celaena that he's never truly seen. Not even in the tournament. This is Otterland's assassin. I think this scene fucking rips. I love this scene. Just the visual of her landing and the daggers are already thrown and she slips into that killing calm.
Yeah, she gives no fucks. I think it is so fun. But also I'm like, Chaol, this is wifey, right?
Yeah.
Just a little moment
This is who's driving your little white Suburban in your dream, right?
Yep. This was the lethal predator he expected to find in the mines, and seeing her like this with nothing human in her eyes freezes his heart.
Excuse me, I'm here to save you. He is, to me, he's like a Steve from Sex and the City. I don't know why, but in my mind, he's like, Miranda?
That sounded just like him.
Gets all Miranda?
She's cutting through the men one after the other until she reaches the guard who was taunting Chaol earlier, and they have a little standoff.
But one of the men, a boomer, I'd be like, it's you, stops them, and he's like, we have enough enemies. There are worse things to face out there.
No, there aren't, because I am here now.
See how she said, I'm here now? Very demure. I think
very mindful.
I love that line. There aren't. I'm here now.
Yeah. She's very mindful. The old man takes off his hood and mask and reveals short white hair and gray eyes that are pleading. He starts to say, perhaps our methods were wrong.
You think? Celaena doesn't give a shit who they are or what they have to say. She doesn't care what their end goal was, what the agenda is. Like, she turns to the guard that has those 2 swords and she grins, and it is on sight. Like, she's not ready to stop fighting. She's
No.
ready to kill everyone in this warehouse.
Her flip has been switched.
And
okay?
that guy, her flip has been switched.
Yeah. Oh my God. Her switch has been flipped. Damn it.
But she knows that this other guy is similar to her in that he's ready, like, whenever, too. Like, all it takes is her grinning at him.
He's been taunting Chaol all day because he's been waiting for a fight, so game on. She sees an arrow shooting right for her, but Archer dives in front of her and hits him in the shoulder. Then he stands between her and the men wearing a Hugh Hefner robe like the rest of them.
It's so embarrassing. Like, you're going to fight me in a robe? But it's like, Archer is not just a nosy hooker like we thought. He is part of this group. He is part of this group that set Celaena up.
Celaena's having trouble keeping that rage back. Chaol and Sam's faces are blending together. But once Chaol is released, she gives them one sentence to convince her not to kill them all.
I've been working with Nehemia to lead these people for the past 6 months.
Well, that'll do it.
That's a pretty good sentence. Archer dismisses the rest of the men with authority. Kind of sexy.
So he's not just a member of this group, he's a leader and a liar.
As they're leaving, the old man is looking at Celaena with a mix of awe and disbelief, which she assumes is because she's literally covered in the blood of his men.
They don't seem upset enough about the men she just killed either.
Archer says he and Nehemia have been leading this movement together. Nehemia herself came to Rifthold to organize a group that could go into Terrasen and start gathering forces against the king, uncover whatever his plans are, which at first Celaena is defensive of like, I would know that if my friend were planning that. But then think about all the conversations she had with you over breakfast talking about Terrasen and the courts, and you could be doing so much more.
Imagine all the times when she tried to talk to you and you shut her down.
Right.
So I guess you don't know a lot. Not to mention when Dorian was literally at your door looking for her and you heard she was out somewhere.
Exactly. Like the night that Dorian blew his magical load, he was looking for her and it was late at night and Nehemia was nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
And Nehemia's been gaslighting Celaena all along, like about the word marks, the book that in the riddle that she found in Davis's office. She's not been researching that riddle like she said she would. Basically everything having to do with word marks and riddles, Nehemia has been gaslighting, throwing her off of the scent.
I mean, even worse, Nehemia has been feeding information from Celaena to this group, too.
And information about Celaena. Now we understand, you know how Archer knew that she was close to Dorian and Chaol?
Mm-hmm. I mean, he may have seen Chaol that day outside the tea shop, but to know about Dorian, somebody inside had to have told him that.
And that's not the only betrayal that Celaena learns about. When she asks if Nehemia is part of this group, like, where is she? Archer points to Chaol and says, ask him.
Chaol straight up lies, but Archer calls him on it. His sources told him that the king informed Chaol over a week ago of a threat on Nehemia's life.
What sources?
Now, if that was just a conversation between Chaol and the king, how does he fucking know that?
I don't know.
I have some questions. But that's why they brought Chaol here, to keep him from questioning Nehemia and ask what kind of questions he'd been commanded to ask her.
Archer also wanted Celaena to see what kind of man Chaol really is. Like, I can just see that dream of hers, just the bubble
crumbling,
bursting.
Meanwhile, Chaol's like, you didn't even ask me any questions.
But he doesn't deny the other stuff. Like, they're like, he's been lying and he knew all this information and we were going to question him. He's like,
what
you
questions?
didn't question me.
Don't lie. Yeah. Archer claims to have realized it's not just questioning that they're doing to Nehemia, who insisted on staying at the castle tonight.
Which is an interesting part that Celaena, I think, doesn't digest in that moment, that Nehemia insisted she stay at the castle knowing there was a threat on her life.
There's too much to take in here.
When Celaena hears it might be too late, she starts running through the city to the glass castle, which of course is glowing with that Disney villain green light.
She sprints all the way to the castle, hearing horse hooves behind her, but not giving a shit.
Because she is running faster than a horse. Like, the horse cannot keep up with her.
That is also wild. She scrambles over a stone wall, her fingernails cracking. Ugh, that makes me cringe. She lands and keeps running through the glass doors past the guards and Dorian.
And you know, Dorian's like, what? Like, just sees her running fast. She gets to Nehemia's door and it's shut with no signs of forced entry. So she's kind of like, okay, I got here in time. And she's mentally going through her next moves. Like, what am I going to tell Nehemia? Where am I going to take her?
Celaena slams through the locked door and on the other side finds blood everywhere and Nehemia and her bodyguards' lifeless, mutilated bodies.
And there is a huge shift in the story and in Celaena, in a lot of the characters, but especially Celaena, from this, like, this is the moment. This is the turning point. So much so that even though, like, that's the end of chapter 29, chapter 30 picks up literally in the same moment of her seeing this, but it's also the beginning of part 2, the Queen's era. So there's literally like BC before Celaena found Nehemia and AC after Celaena found Nehemia. Like, the story is just so different.
It's such a dramatic shift for her now. People are rushing in behind Celaena, who is just standing there staring at the mutilated corpse of her friend, of the light of Eelway, this woman who had been a beacon of hope for an entire country.
And one of the people who ran in behind Celaena is Dorian, and he has tears running down his face. Celaena reaches out to touch his oddly warm tears. So you're like, okay, they're having a bit of a sweet moment. They're going to be there for each other. But then her fingers slide down Dorian's face to his neck.
Deep down, Celaena knows Dorian didn't do this, but in her mind, all she can see is the Crown Prince of Otterlin, the son of the man who either did this or let this happen.
And she doesn't actually do anything to Dorian, but there's one person who has always been able to see Celaena, who can see where she is mentally, like, can pick up where this is going.
She turns to see Chaol with his hand on his sword.
Chaol, who had known there was a threat on Nehemia's life and done and said nothing. To Celaena, to Nehemia, to her guards, he did nothing.
Chaol barely has time to release his sword before she launches herself at him, gouging 4 lines across his cheek with her nails.
I think that that's kind of important because Celaena's a trained fighter. She could have punched him, kicked him. She could have done all these things that she's capable of, but she's reacting with emotion in that moment. You know, like the nails to me is a much more emotional response.
It's very personal and it's very like
it is
claws out. I am ready, like attack.
Right. And it's animalistic. Like,
yeah.
This is a person who is trained in suppressing emotion. Like, she has worn this mask of indifference, not indifference, but kind of apathy for most of her life. And everything we've talked about, this door she has in her mind that she stuffs everything behind, kind of like you with your online shopping that you never sent back. But it's like, it's not only been cracked, that shit is burst open at this point, and everything is coming up.
Everywhere. He doesn't use his sword or let his guards get involved or do anything really other than play defense.
Because the girl that Chaol knew, or thought he knew, is gone. Because did Chaol really even know her? Like, the girl that he was daydreaming about, this idea of Celaena, did she ever even really exist? Like, he's kind of already mourning this girl, even though she's standing right in front of him.
She does eventually get a hold of a dagger, and she's pressing down with all of her weight. He says, Celaena, I'm your friend.
You will never be my friend. You will always be my enemy.
There's so much hatred and finality in that sentence.
It reminds me, this is so fucking stupid, but it reminds me in Revenge of the Sith when Anakin is yelling to Obi-Wan, I hate you. Like, in that moment where it's like his pivotal turn for that character.
His big change.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and Anakin does become another character after that.
And let's be honest, no one should end up with who they lose their virginity to. Like, I would be right now an army wife if I let that night in the back of a Jetta determine the rest of my life. There are a few exceptions where people are like, look, with their high school sweethearts and it works out. The majority of us
gone really well, but you guys are the exception to the rule. The rest of us,
it's not a good idea.
There were growing pains. There's a sudden chill in the air.
Because, it's cold in here. There must be some magic in the atmosphere.
I was about to do the full, like, bring it on. Okay, sorry. Chaol is on the ground, not really understanding what's going on, but Celaena's hand stops as if frozen in midair. She's hissing at someone.
That is not very demure.
And she's thrashing against some invisible force.
Like the Force. And she does eventually kind of get a Yoda. Rattle the stars, you must.
Oh, God. Nice. Celaena is still wrestling with some unseen force when Rest, the guard she's probably closest to other than Chaol, slams the pommel of his sword into her head.
As Celaena falls, a part of Chaol falls along with her because men really do be making everything about themselves. She's just lost her friend and she's been knocked out, and he's like, this affects me.
There's betrayal all around her, and Chaol's like, oh, my dream.
My dreams. Who's going to drive my white Suburban and pick up my brood of children?
You know what? Fuck off, Chaol. We switch POVs to Dorian as Chaol carries Celaena down to the dungeons.
I mean, what a turn. Remember when on his birthday, he was like, if you ever do this again, I'll throw you in the dungeons. Not because he actually thought it was wrong, but because he was so scared. And now he's taking her down to the dungeons into a cell right beside Celaena.
Dorian tries to give Celaena his cloak, and that motherfucker Chaol stops him.
That little bit of kindness that Celaena had for Celaena, who literally drugged her, Chaol can't find for Celaena.
I mean, I know that he thinks anything can be used as a weapon by her.
I know, and I mean, maybe she could like whip it out. And
I mean, what's she gonna do besides choke herself with it? Like I
don't know. He was planning their brood of children a day ago. Now he's locking her in the dungeons, and he won't even let Dorian give her something to cover herself up with.
I mean, and the fact that Dorian, the one Celaena told to leave her alone, had wanted to give her the cloak is really sad.
And Dorian is spiraling in more ways than one in this moment because he just watched Celaena try to kill Chaol. He's probably like, But now she's locked in the dungeons, and he's seen Nehemia's mutilated body, but he also used his magic. Like, all these things are happening at once, but he also used his magic to stop Celaena.
In front of people, yeah. At least only Celaena seemed to notice it was Dorian who was stopping her.
Halfway up the stone stairs out of the dungeons, Chaol slumps to a step, as he should, and puts his head in his hands, asking Dorian, what have I done? And Dorian's like, can I get a little context? Like, Dorian does not know what the fuck is going on. I mean, he knows Nehemia has been murdered, but he's like, what does this have to do with you? Was just chatting
in a hallway when everybody comes sprinting past and there's like gore and drama. He's like, what the fuck? It's shocking. Chaol tells him everything, from the kidnapping to the rebel group to Celaena saving him and that anonymous threat on Nehemia's life that he kept to himself.
He tells him almost everything because he leaves out all the fucking. But back to those horse hooves that we talked about Celaena could hear while she was running, like Forrest Gumping her way through the city. Chaol has never seen anyone move like that. He found a horse within seconds of her taking off, and she still outran him. And he's like, how?
What does this mean? Before, Dorian might have dismissed it, but he just Tommy Fury'd a stone wall and apparently has magic hands, so anything is possible.
R.I.P. Tommy Fury and
Molly May.
Molly May.
Love Island for you guys.
Little Love Island. I was just watching a video about that, and he was doing some shady things in a club in Dubai.
We have to discuss later. I have questions.
As far as Dorian's father's involvement, he ate with the king and queen that night, and the king said that he was talking to Nehemia after dinner. So CSI Dorian is determined that his father wasn't responsible. I mean, they clear him pretty quickly, but for the story's sake, yeah, he didn't have anything to do with it.
I mean, I was like, I love that the king, you expect the king would actually be there with his bare hands doing this.
Right,
like he couldn't hire somebody.
But if the king didn't want her dead, and I mean, he did, but who else did?
That's a scary question. They don't seem concerned enough about the fact that there is a killer on the loose in the castle right now.
Right. Like, they're sitting on the step, and it's like, guys, is there a serial killer loose in these walls?
I mean, there was somebody eating people's bodies, last book, and we weren't that panicked either. So great.
That's a good point. I mean, but this person is mutilating and arranging bodies.
I mean, does that sound like anybody that we know?
It does. Dennis Rader.
Well, I mean, him too. As for Celaena, she attacked the captain of the guards in front of his men.
Who cares? Like, that is very, like, it was in front of my men. Okay, well, your men are little gossips.
Your men that have been around me the entire time I've been here and know who I am. It's not like it was like on a stage for everybody to see. But I guess what choice does Chaol have but to lock her up?
And there's no Riverdale. You won't even get this. In Riverdale, there was this jailhouse rock scene when Archie was in prison. They like dance outside of that. Like, there's no love after a lockup. After that, when she said, like, you will always be my enemy, Chaol has no hope that they're going to get back together or she's ever going to let him in again. He can only hope that, like, maybe she won't try to actively kill us.
I mean, yeah, she was not holding
back. Because right now
earlier.
It's on site. Like, as far as he knows, the second she gets out, first thing on the list is to kill Chaol.
Celaena wakes up in her cell next to Celaena's, and who wants the tea?
She wants the tea because she's a cereal. But also, I too would be like, "What are you doing here? What happened?"
I mean, yeah,
I'm fucking bored.
Did you think you were better than me? How'd you get down here? Just like with Sam, Celaena's blaming herself. It was deja vu. She loses someone, snaps, and is captured before she can get revenge. Now, after somehow beginning to heal and piece herself back together, she's back where she started.
So there's no more daydreaming. This Barbie's job is death, and she doesn't need a not excessively handsome Ken. When she tells Caltaine that Nehemia is dead, she trades some of that misery with her own. Duke Parrington is going to Timu Morath in 5 days, and Caltaine is going with him. Her only choices are you can marry the Duke or rot in the dungeon. So again, it's kind of like when they curbside picked up Celaena and Endovir, and they were like, you can either stay here or you can go with us. Caltaine doesn't have much of a choice right now.
Yeah, I feel like even if you said I'll stay, they'll make you going.
Yeah, exactly.
Celaena is confused why the Duke would want someone who narked on him, but Caltaine doesn't know what game they're playing. All she knows is her headaches are worse and those wings never stop.
Which reminds Celaena of what Nehemia said about her dreams being filled with shadows and wings. But Caltaine is kind of like Amanda Bynes on Instagram Live. Like, it's hard to follow the train of thought.
Yeah. Celaena's mourning her friend, devastated. The last thing Nehemia said to her was, "You're nothing more than a coward."
And Nehemia knew like what was going to happen. I don't know if she knew the exact timeline, but to leave that as your last words.
Intentionally avoided Celaena the next morning. Like she intentionally,
it's just brutal.
Like all of these little bombs for Celaena she placed there. What was I saying? Oh, she was mourning her friend when Caltaine's mind clears long enough to tell her that if she ever gets out, to make sure they're punished someday.
And Celaena's like, fucking bet. That is one oath that Celaena will make.
We are on the same page. But today isn't that day, so Celaena reaches for her iron cup of drugged water and butt chugs it, slipping in and out of consciousness for the next 3 days.
It's so unexpected, like all of it is, but at the end of Throne of Glass, at the end of book 1, I didn't think that we were going to see Caltaine again, but here they are having this little moment, and that's Sarah is really good with the side characters and like tying up loose ends and having arcs for everyone. Like, why want that energy for the rest of the Massverse, especially Crescent City? Like, let's get that energy for Fury and Juniper and Hypaxia.
Well, she plants like little crumbs. So like you read little scenes, you're like, okay, that's nice. But they come back later and tie things together, which is it's fun because the creativity keeps you on your toes.
And especially like Caltaine, this isn't the last we're going to see of Caltaine.
Isn't that exciting? We had no idea we would see more from her, and now we're getting like little nuggets here and there.
Well, and then like we see Nox later on and Caltaine, and it's just, I don't know. I love Throne of Glass so fucking much.
Sarah did a great job of not only writing great characters, but giving us so many different moments that it all comes back together later. And it's not obvious when you're reading it, which I like. I don't want to know everything up front because I'm going to DNF a book. I want to be surprised. I want to be like, oh my God, wow. Yeah. Like I want that moment. So I love the way she's written that. On the 4th day, Chaol visits, unable to go another day without checking on her.
Since the bodies were found, he and his men have been combing the castle and the city. I'm assuming like they did last time where they just run around the streets being like, what happened?
Hey, did one of you guys kill somebody?
He tried to explain what happened to the king, but the king doesn't fucking care. Like he's before the king being like, oh God, I'm so sorry. This is what happened. And the king's like, okay.
I mean, the king's ready to conquer Eelway, so he does not care that Nehemia is dead. And he doesn't care about dealing with her family because they're no threat. I mean, he might not have been the one to kill Nehemia or order her death, but he's not exactly sad.
Right.
Again,
he let it happen.
Oh, yeah. He's mostly just annoyed about the inevitable uproar in Eelway before he's ready.
When Chaol explained the Celaena situation, the king had just said to get her in line. Like, again, he doesn't, it's like, oh, she attacked me in front of my guards. And he's like, well, get her in line.
Don't be such a baby.
Don't be a bitch.
Take control. Which is why Chaol is carrying Celaena out of her cell.
And he grunts, which, bitch, I haven't eaten in 4 days. I look great. How dare you make a sound carrying me?
Carry me in silence. But at least Chaol is miserable too. He blames himself for Nehemia and he lost Celaena.
It was just his fault. He has no one else to blame. You played yourself. He knew the second she turned, like she's looking at Nehemia's body, she turns to him, and he knew in that moment that Celaena is never going to let him in again. Like he fucked it up and there's no coming back from it.
He fucked up so bad. Celaena wakes up in her own bed, clean thanks to Philippa, but no Nehemia to have breakfast in bed with. Just she and Fleetfoot and their broken hearts.
Poor Fleetfoot. She doesn't understand. She? He?
I think it's she.
Okay.
I think they talked about her before. I think it's she.
I just had a moment. But that is the very depressing note that we're going to end on.
But we're going to pick up next week with chapters 33 through 40.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, guys.